public trust on police has been broken for the longest time. Why our Prime Minister had to give a call for the transformation of our Indian police force. What needs to be changed, why immediately, and what can be done. The very institution which is meant to protect the citizens is the one which they fear and hesitate to approach. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to talk about that very institution, that is the Indian Police. Why there is a need to reform, why the public perception is abysmally low, what should have been done, what are the recommendations and what can be done now. So let us start with understanding that how it came to the news. So basically there was a 60th annual DGP IGP conference which was happening in Raipur, and in this very conference our Prime Minister highlighted that there is an urgent need to transform the whole public perception that exists of police, especially among the youth. Now when we are talking about the Indian police, the whole idea where we talk about changing or transforming the public perception has been pitched in order to bring in more professionalism, sensitivity and also responsiveness. Now many of you might think that why are we having this conversation now? This should have been on the book, on the cards for a long while, but at the same time you have to understand that yes, this was very much required, but at this point of time the needs are at a point that it can no longer be ignored. We will be getting into that also, but a lot of you might also think why this perception matters, the work matters. The perception in this very scenario matters because of the fact when we are talking about police itself, it is the face and it is the main front when we talk about the state. So if we are talking about state on one side and citizens on one side, the person in between, the interface in between, the first point of contact or the first that help is coming from police. So we can easily say the first and constant interface of state is police. So if the perception of police is not great, then so is the perception of the state. So basically when we are talking about police, it shapes basically how the citizen think of the government, what is the trust that exists between the government as well as the citizens. It also highlights that there is a trust deficit. If there is a trust deficit, then the crime reporting, actual scenario at the ground will not be present and there will be a high level of criminal activity that might be going on in the nation, but it is not being reported. And if the perception is not right, that means the legitimacy that is required for this institution is not present, and if that is not present, then rule of law, the democracy that we talk about, the very basic fundamentals, the pillars of our constitution, they will be non-essential. So this negative perception that exists, it induces not only fear, but it also brings in underreporting, it also brings in hostility from the citizens, not just to the police but to the state also, and this all leads to a different cycle in which there is lower cooperation, not just from the police's end but also from the public's end. Now when we are talking about perception itself, it becomes important yet again to understand why we are having this conversation. We are having this conversation for a very simple reason, that if we want to become a developed nation by 2047, the Viksit Bharat by 2047, it is not just about numbers in terms of GDP, it is also about a safe, transparent, efficient policing which will facilitate a society which is of complementary to a developed country. And in this very scenario, if we are talking about the present times that we get to see, we have seen rise in custodial violence, encounter killings. The social media has shown that what is the level of misconduct that we have seen in police, and new criminal laws, they also demand modern policing. So we have a reason in the present, and if we want to change the future to not look like what we are seeing, we need to talk about it, we need to ask for that change, and we need to bring that change. Now, when we have been talking so much about the perception, we really need to look at what the perception is we talking about and is it really supported by data. So let me quote a few numbers here, starting with Lok Niti. Center for Study of Developing Societies. So as per their data, only 27% of people trust the police a lot. That means if you look at the remainder number, there is a huge section of population which does not trust the police at all. If another number is to be seen of the Indian Justice Report of 2023, police ranks lowest in terms of diversity, training, human resources and also infrastructure. If we go by the CHRI report, that is the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, we find that the highest number of complaints are about corruption, refusing to register the first information report and also of intimidation. If we look at Pew Research Institute, they have their type attitude studies. In that we find that women and minorities which need to be protected the most feel least the safe in a police station. So overall we have in front of us what looks like a coercive, corrupt and politically influenced institution rather than that should be sensitive, responsive, proactive and protecting institution. But it does not mean that the reasons are just lying around in the system as well. Let us explore the reasons that why this public perception has formed over years. So there are certain reasons which are historically rooted. For example, if we talk about the colonial legacy. So the Police Act of 1861, which was created for surveillance, it was created for control and suppression of dissent. And if you can understand, this is something Britishers wanted for Indians, but this is what resulted even after independence, that we are carrying that legacy, where there is a very harsh command culture, lack of accountability, and public is seen as someone who is comparatively inferior as a subject but not as a stakeholder in the society. Another important thing that you would understand from this very context, that is the political interference. For the very long time, there have been transfers which have been arbitrary. The incentives are linked to loyalty to the political figures, not to integrity. There is high amount of politicization, and definitely another important one is the social distance that exists among the police forces. There are other reasons as well, such as the operational and systematic challenges which exist within the police force. For example, you get to see the overload and lack of manpower. As per UN norms, you should have 222 police person per lakh, but if you talk about India, it is almost half, that is 152 per lakh. If we talk about the vacancy that exists, they are extremely high. The work hours are tough and there are no offs as such. So obviously, as the capacity of the institution, that is also extremely stretched. We cannot stand here and just pinpoint at the faults. We also need to look at the challenges which are present. For example, training gaps. When we are talking about training, which needs the maximum amount of resource allocation, it only gets 1.3% budget for that. 80% of the constables, which are the main fulcrum point of this whole framework, they do not receive any retraining in more than 5 years. Just imagine how pathetically this infrastructure lacks to facilitate the system, to facilitate the people who are in the system and help them serve better, which also points towards the outdated curriculum that exists. Another important factor that comes as a challenge is the infrastructure limitation that we get to see. More than 40% stations do not have modern forensic tools, do not have proper management. A great example here, unfortunate yet appropriate example, is the Nowgam blast that we saw. There is low CCTV coverage, poor digital record keeping, and the corruption and extortion is present in every nook and corner, which we all know about. So we get to see FIR are invalidated. There is a lot of resistance to register this, and even if it is registered, it has seen favorism, it has seen corruption, it has seen bribe. Apart from all this, there is another important huge angle that comes in form of atrocities which are carried out by this particular force, and they have been highlighted in our own reports. If we talk about NCRB data, we have seen 175 custody deaths, more than 1800 judicial custody deaths, charge sheeting is less than 25% and conviction rate is again less than 2%. This clearly highlights the fact that the perception that public has comes from this data that induces clear fear, knowing that approach, the hesitation that exists is from the fact that there will be no help will be given, or they could be part of what looks here. So these are the situations that have been lying in front of the citizens and in the institution of the police, which creates the rift and makes it wider day by day. Now that we have understood that what is the core issue, where it is germinating from, it becomes also important to put an emphasis and understand why reforms are the need of the immediate hour. When we are talking about the reforms, first thing that we need to understand, and that is not all, we have encounter that's in front of us, other violation where NHRC has gone ahead and highlighted there are more than 10,000 complaints every year which highlights the incidence of torture, illegal detention, encounter killings and much more. And this is why it becomes immediately of importance to bring these reforms, so that the new criminal codes, be it Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, be it Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita and BSA, the whole importance of bringing in these new criminal codes will be fading away if they do not come with police reforms, if there is not enough emphasis on forensic evidence, time-bound investigation, victim rights, digital evidence, etc. The times are changing, the crimes are changing with that. The tech-driven crimes, for example, cybercrime has seen a huge rise. The police as of now seems ill-equipped for AI-enabled frauds that lie in front of us and that citizens are suffering from. Another important factor from the economic and governance dimension, that if we want growth in our country, which will come with investment, and we want a fair investment climate, rule of law is fundamental for that. Other than that, another thing that has been highlighted by our Prime Minister is the fact, if we are talking about Cyclone Ditwa, this is something we see that needs to be addressed by a disaster response team. But police is also required here. So this requires for a integrated response, and in all of this perception matters a lot, because people will not come out for help if the numbers and perception and the fear lies as we have seen. Now moving to understand that what have been the reforms that have been taken, or what are the recommendations around it that have been made that can actually help the situation that we are talking about. So yes, we have seen recommendations and reforms if they are brought in which can bring in a huge change. And if we talk about bringing in the reform, three major drivers of these reform could be the Malimat Committee of 2003, which emphasizes on bringing in the sensitivity through victim support, bringing in justice balance, and also forensics as well, where the special investigation focus should be scientific, there should be rights to victims and their witnesses, which brings in support and compensation also, and also adversarial system reforms. That means admissibility of evidence needs to be facilitated. We also have Model Police Act of 2006, which talks about facilitating better surveillance through CCTVs, transparency, and also bringing in the stakeholders, that is citizens, in form of citizen groups and community policing. It also focuses on, highlights the need of independent oversight mechanisms so that the police complaint authority exists and citizens can approach it, something on the very similar lines of banking ombudsman. Functional autonomy, so that there is separation of investigation on the other side and law and order on the other side, and most importantly, people-friendly policing, so that the public cooperation and accountability both goes hand in hand. Another important component when we are talking about reforms is ARC 2007, which were the second Administrative Reform Commission. They talked about smart policing, but here smart had a different meaning. S went for strict yet sensitive, M was for modern and mobile, A for alert and accountable, reliable and responsive, and techno-savvy and trained, which means which will give a holistic overhaul to what our police at present looks like now. It also talked about bringing in institutional integrity, which will be the shield of this force and the institution, bringing in e-governance and coordination, so as to ensure that the police goes ahead and reforms with the present times. There are many other recommendations such as National Police Commission, which was set up in 1977-81. Then we have Riboro Committee, which talked about a Police Accountability Commission in 1998. We also have Padmanabhaya Committee of 2000, which talked about modernization of police through IT and to address the rising cybercrime as well. So there have been enough recommendations to actually highlight the fact that yes, it is in dire need of reform, police is in dire need of reform, and this could not just change the picture for the citizens but for the forces as well, because they are also overstretched, they are also going through the systematic challenges, operational challenges, and this is where all the stakeholders need to come in to bring the change, be it the citizens, be it the government, and also this institution itself. In conclusion, we have to understand that the thought of police should be not coercive, reactive force, but as democratic, preventive, and transparent, and also people-centric. And as I said, that can be done only through political will, structural reforms, tech reforms, and empathy. And that is when we will see the change of transformed people perception as how it was highlighted by our Prime Minister. Now that was all for today. Thank you so much.